getting into a top 10 college, getting your first job offer of $65,000, or earning $500,000 in revenue. These are all numbers we look at and examine on a day-to-day basis. They're benchmarks in life, in school, in business that we really look at to evaluate our progress. As a graduate of civil and environmental engineering, I'm somebody that loves numbers. My initial go-to is for the black and white, 2x plus 5y. Water flowing at 2 liters per minute, or determining the soil content, the water content of soil for a future foundation, or calculating the point load on a beam for a structure that's going to sit on that foundation. These are all variables, numbers in our equations that we can calculate, particularly as civil engineers. But not everything in life is so clear. And during my engineering and entrepreneur endeavors, I'm often reminded of a quote by Albert Einstein. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So let me say that again. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. There's something deeper here. It's really the human side of engineering. When you add people, culture, communication, perspective, all of a sudden these equations become much more complicated. And I started to really, really grasp to that when I was studying engineering, and I wanted to learn much more. And I really started to understand that engineers become very involved with intersocial and interpersonal situations. But I didn't learn that in the classroom. I didn't really learn that from my professors teaching the fundamentals, but I learned it in Thailand. When I was a sophomore at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, I founded the student chapter, Engineers Without Borders, and maybe many of you have heard of that organization. And my student team at the time was sitting around a campfire in the Hill Tribe community of northern Thailand, on the border of Thailand and Myanmar. And we asked our professor, are we really making an impact on the village? And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, through engineering of efficient water and sanitation systems, engineers can save more lives and prevent more illnesses than the entire medical profession. Now, that was a bit of a radical statement, but something that just really, really stuck with me. And I wanted to become consumed with all things water. I really wanted to understand, what did that mean? How could we make more efficient water systems? How could we save lives? And ultimately, how could we prevent illnesses that take away lives? So I just became consumed with all things water, and to the point that I even founded my own company, DayOne Response, which is focused on providing clean drinking water, primarily after a disaster. So today, I want to just give you a couple of experiences that I had in Thailand through my graduate work and also through DayOne Response, where I continue, and I still continue to today, learn that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that is counted counts. So let's go back to Thailand. We were a student team that were working on a water treatment system, and we approached the movement with the community in the basic kind of design to implementation process. First, you assess, and typically you go into the community or you talk to people involved with the problem to understand what's happening. What do they really need? Then you take that information back, you analyze, you determine what are the options, and you select potentially a couple of solutions that might be appropriate. So then you bring that back, figure out what is appropriate, and then you design. You get the calculators out, you start designing, whether it's a foundation, a slow sand filtration system, a septic system, and you start to build and design that on paper, and then you actually implement the solution. But one key thing that we learned is you add community to this, and all of a sudden, every piece of that becomes a lot more complicated, but becomes a lot more appropriate, and we can start to measure what really is needed. So we learned 3 specific lessons in Thailand in which we forgot to engage the community. And I wanted to share those with you today. So first, as a student group, we were so eager to provide the community with a solution that we wanted to bring it before we arrived on the assessment trip. So before we actually engaged the community, we wanted to have a solution. So we thought, rain catchment system. They were having issues with their water. We thought, rain catchment, this is a great, appropriate solution. It's low cost. We can put it on every single roof. Well, when we got to the community, most of the homes are made of thatched bamboo. The roofs, it's not appropriate to put a rain catchment system. If we would have waited, if we would have talked with the community, we would have learned that pretty quickly and saved ourselves a lot of time. And then we started to realize, okay, the community can be part of the solution. So also during this assessment phase, when we were in country, when we were with the Hill Tribes, we started to run surveys. So we visited home to home and asking them kind of what's going on. So we talked to the mother of the household, the father. What's their day-to-day life like? Where do they get water? What kinds of activities do they do? And what we found out is that the children were getting sick, but the adults were okay. The children were having stomach issues and complaining of illnesses, but the adults were okay. And we just couldn't figure out why that was happening. But it wasn't until we went to the health clinic, sat down with the clinicians there, and they served us hot tea. And then that struck us. When we were drinking that hot tea, we realized every single household we went to, they all served us hot tea. So the adults are drinking hot tea, they were boiling their water, and thus they were killing the germs and the bacteria. But the kids weren't drinking hot tea. They were out playing soccer, drinking straight from the river, and that's where the contamination was. So it wasn't through the surveys that we learned this, but actually the interaction with the community. Again, we had to add the community in to find out what was happening. So fast forward, we decided focus on the school, that's where the students are, and design a community system. And we picked the slow sand filtration system, basically treating water through sand. So we designed this, we did all the work here, we built it to the number of students, what's the capacity, what kind of flow do we need? There was 1,200 students, some teachers, we added in some safety factors. We thought, okay, we're good to go. We've got a system, 2,500 gallons of water per day. We engaged the community, they helped us build it. But we still missed one thing. It wasn't until 9 months later that we realized that we only designed the system for drinking water, not for everything else, not for wash water, not for just typical things that kids are doing. They're playing soccer, getting muddy, they want to wash their feet off, maybe they're doing paper mache projects, and all of a sudden, the capacity of the system was overwhelmed. The need was much greater than, the demand was greater than the capacity. The need was there. And we missed that because we forgot to look at what was happening day to day. So it's those experiences when I was a student that really caught me. We failed, but we iterated, and to today, the system is now working since 2007 with this Hill Tribe community. But it was those lessons of engaging the community that we actually realized there's something deeper to providing an appropriate solution. So then, again, I was consumed all things water. I decided to pursue my master's at Cal Poly on water treatment. And that's really where I designed the core technology of DayOne Response, which is a household water treatment system. It's like a backpack that you can collect water, treat, transport, and store. You can visually see the treatment working, and it's used after disaster, like after the Nepal earthquake. So I designed this as my graduate work, and I spent hours and hours in the lab working, iterating, failing, doing it again, and understanding how to build a system. And my professor at the time really encouraged me to use the resources at Cal Poly. Talk to the plastics department, understand how to actually build something. Talk to the manufacturing department and understand how to, once you build it, how do you manufacture it? Is it cost effective? Talk to the graphics department. I engaged a student there to design pictograph instructions so we could really put in an appropriate solution. So engaging the full amount of resources that I had helped me be successful. So I realized even in my graduate work, it wasn't about me. It was about the we. It was about the people I was engaging. And it wasn't about the hundreds and hundreds of hours in the lab, but about the quality of the people and the work we were providing. But one key thing that stuck with me is a lesson that Dr. Tricia Compas-Markman taught me. So again, it wasn't about the design, it wasn't about even the solution, but it was about following up and following through. Early on in our graduate work, we received some grant funding from a local alumni group through the Innovation Quest at Cal Poly, and that funding launched my graduate work. And my professor said, make sure you keep them posted. Give them a monthly update. Even if you're just working in the lab, let them know how you're using their funds. And I started to do that, and I tried to do that as much as I could in the midst of my classes. And as I did that, I started to realize how much that group became part of what I was doing. And today, which is about 5 or 6 years later, those individuals are now on my board. They're now advisors and mentors. I didn't realize that was going to happen. I didn't even know I was going to start the company, but engaging those people, asking for help when I needed help, really started to allow me to see there's something much bigger here. So then I started DayOne Response in 2010, again focused on providing clean drinking water around disaster response or preparedness, even here in the Bay Area, or even engaging different government agencies. And when I was finally graduating in civil engineering, starting a company wasn't something that I thought about, wasn't something that our peers, at the time entrepreneurship was not part of our vocabulary. Normally, as a civil engineering grad, you work as a consultant or you work for a government agency. And those are very valid and very needed jobs. Many of my friends have them today and are very successful. But it didn't call to me. It's not something I really felt. I didn't feel myself fitting into one of those particular areas, and decided to pursue the unknown, that variable that I didn't quite know what it was, the risk. And that's where I became very intrigued with following this technology and making sure it was appropriate and engaging those around me. And so that's how I started DayOne Response. But I didn't always know what was next. And I think sometimes it's important not to know what the future is going to bring, but to be ready and to be prepared. So at DayOne Response, we are focused on numbers, and we try to really focus on what counts. So for us, over 255 million people per year are affected by natural disasters. They're not just the ones you hear in the news, but daily rain events that are affecting West Africa, East Africa, the Philippines, and other Asia nations. And so when I look at what are these numbers, what does that mean to us as a company, we can start to dive deeper. So in 2010, I traveled to Haiti after the earthquake, and I met Dimitri. He was one of our translators, and he helped us as we were providing our technology to the local community. And he shared that everybody in Haiti lost somebody. They lost a brother, they lost a sister, they lost a father or an aunt or a mother. So he said the community wasn't just affected, but the entire nation was affected. But then I started to see as I was going around Haiti that the entrepreneur spirit was coming out. People were bringing their goods, hanging it on the rubble or the rebar and selling things. So you started to see some hope was coming from a community that hit pretty bad by a natural disaster. And Dimitri shared a story that he walked 9 miles to go to a water distribution point after the earthquake just to get 1 water bottle, just 1 liter of water. And he couldn't even drink it himself. He gave it to his niece. And so I realized DayOne Response could be part of this equation with the technology we have, but we have to understand what's happening in the community. Is it appropriate? Maybe it is, and other times maybe it isn't. More recently, I was in Nepal after the earthquake back this May, and I met Sudarshan, and he was a local government agent, and his home had collapsed in the earthquake. So he was trying to get through that. But then he was also really concerned with his community where he grew up, which is outside the main city, making sure that they were okay. So he took my team to his community, and we started to see that most of the homes were in rubble. They just had a door frame that was standing. So they lost their kitchen, they lost their toilets, they lost their access to running water. These are all things I think we take for granted on a day-to-day basis. How do we eat a meal with our family? How do we use basic needs of water and sanitation? And so it was that opportunity to see that while a community may be down, they're going to work together, and we can be part of that, helping them kind of get through the first day and the next day and then weeks and then months, and then there's some sustainability there. So these experiences of local people that I've met in, whether it's in a disaster zone or a disaster-prone area, have really started to touch the work that we're doing and see that these numbers really count in the day-to-day life. So it's the communities we work with in Uganda, in the Philippines, in the Ivory Coast, in Ghana, and even here in the Bay Area, that we have to keep considering what is happening in a day-to-day life. So it's really about the perspective and measuring those things. And so I think no matter if you're an engineer or a teacher or a student or a politician, or a business person, we as a community really have a responsibility to make the numbers count. Thank you.